So, namaste. I'm very happy to be joined by Bruce Martin, Navadvipa Das Ji, who's the editor of the Ṣaṭ-Sandarbhas, translated by Babaji Satyanarayana Das, and who is the author of several publications, articles, and co-author of other books with Babaji, who has studied a lot in the field of consciousness, spirituality, and energy work, who has himself a lot of experience in that field of energy work, who has many decades of experience with qigong and perhaps other energy systems. So I thought he's the perfect person to inquire from about modern mystics' experiences in the realm of consciousness. And I would like to understand how that can be reconciled with Gaudīya Vaiṣṇava understanding of Shastra.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I actually started my translation career around 1992. So I've been involved in the field of translation and editing for the last 33 years. Initially, I was studying Sanskrit, Bengali, and Hindi as just as a basis of going into the study of the scriptures, to have access to them firsthand, and to gain a greater understanding of the scripture. Of course, up to that time, I had been involved in the path for since 1979 is when I first became involved. But even for years before that, actually from the time of 15 years old, I was studying Buddhism and Vedanta, and had some exposure to the Upanishads and Zen, and was practicing yoga, and had my first introduction to Tai Chi at the time. So there was already some years leading up to becoming involved with the Krishna movement. And I moved to Vrindavan in 1990, so that really became the beginning of my period of study of Sanskrit and so on. Initially, I just began translating portions of Jīva Dharma and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, again as a way of going more deeply into the philosophy. I shared some of these translation pieces with friends and devotees that encouraged me to pursue it, that saw some potential. And so I was continuing this translation. I translated some smaller works, including Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu, Manasiksha, the Shikshastak, Manasiksha and Shikshastak editions of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu of Vishwanath Chakravarti, and at least the first part of Jīva Dharma. And of course, while getting more and more involved in translation, I was avidly studying all the Goswami works, but all the supportive literature, meaning the whole Vedic context, the various darshans and the sutra literature, and so on and so forth. But then around the mid-90s, I was relating this earlier in our exchange, it occurred to me that although I had greatly enlarged the context, in which I was undertaking this service, but it was still, in a sense, confined. It was still within the Vedic exploration, with virtually no exposure to anything outside of that.
Mm.
And I felt that in order to be relevant, in order to serve the purpose of translation, which was not just for a select devotee community, but the wisdom that was coming through was so universal, but needed to be rendered in a language that could communicate, that could touch the hearts, that could find correspondence with seekers of all traditions. And for that to be possible, I needed to be in contact with those traditions. I needed to be in contact with the language and the grammar of physics and modern psychology and so on. So this began a vast study of many disciplines, which is still ongoing, and which began to, with every new discipline studied, putting it into conversation with the Gaudīya tradition, and also, let's say, approaching each of these traditions with an openness, instead of like holding on to a set of beliefs and ideas to be defended.
Yeah.
These are the core ideas that need to be defended against all the heretical ideas, like bracketing all of that, exploring each new system on its own terms, allowing it to disclose itself in its own terms, and then putting it into dialogue, with the Gaudīya understanding. So this brought new insights that were, in a sense, self-disclosed. And my whole exploration of Qigong, which began in 2003. Of course, I had a background in yoga prior to that, but from beginning in 2003 and continuing up till now, there was a very, very deep exploration of Qigong, both in terms of theory and practice, which for a period of 10 years involved anywhere from 4 to 6 hours of practice every day, with hardly missing a single day in the course of the whole year. I could maybe count no more than 10 days, that I might miss.
Mm.
And as a result of that exploration, there was, in a sense, an immediate disclosure of the dimensions of the body-mind system and how they fit together. So an immediate experience of the whole vital network of psychosomatic flow channels within the system, nadis or meridians, chakras, including immediate disclosure of subtle sound, light, and tacticity that are functioning within those realms, and the integration. And let's say all of that immediate experience made the approach to the philosophical inquiry and translation, allowed it to take place on a different level, on a experiential, phenomenological level, you know, like describing, not just trying to translate in terms of an intellectual exercise, or it's just working with words.
Mm.
But first and foremost, the experience of what is being described, how it's given in consciousness, and then the language is, in a sense, disclosed by itself to accord with those experiences. So all of this experience, has it been helpful in both the intuition of and the description of within my given seva of translating? Absolutely.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So this is some background of my study and experience, that I'm trying to bring to this discussion.
Thank you so much. And then I think we can dive into the questions. Why do so many people from different cultures, different backgrounds, all say the same thing about certain points, and how to reconcile that with Shastra? And one of the points is karma. What is karma? And I have sent you that Word file about what some channels, some light beings say about karma. And our idea about karma is just that we have no choice. It's karma is influenced by our present action and by our consciousness. And once the momentum is set, then everything else is arranged by higher beings. Like this one verse, Bhagavatam 3:31:1. So he explains how the soul enters the womb and so on. And our past karma is something which is it's like a result of our previous action. And that result we get that result in our next birth. And it's arranged by some higher powers or intelligences, without any choice from our side. So only very advanced souls can choose their birth, like yogis or Bhishma Dev was able to choose the time of death, but otherwise a soul has absolutely no choice. And in many of these sessions I have experienced, I have heard, there are many channels who speak, they channel even the soul of a person, and they find out, they get into the scene of their planning of the next life, and they hear the conversations. And then this makes total sense for the person, and gives them big relief also to understand why they planned a very tragic situation, like some extreme situations, mother losing a child and losing a beloved one, and why this happens. Why would somebody choose it voluntarily? And then it is explained that this is happening because that soul needed to experience something which they couldn't experience in their last life. And it's a sort of a balance. Experience goes too much into one side, and then it is balanced by having the other experience, or by having the experience of another angle, so that they understand the perspective of the perpetrator or of the victim or whatever it is. So I've come across this again and again, and Rob Schwartz has dedicated his whole life to exploring that. He has worked with various mediums who, independent of each other, can access these situations of the pre-birth planning and why even the soul chooses different other people to have this life experience with them. So all that doesn't that has no place in our philosophy. Absolutely no. And I see no way to reconcile it. So my big question is, how is it? How is it that so many people speak about it, so many mediums speak about it who have no contact with each other? I think Edgar Cayce was maybe the first one, Madame Blavatsky, who started speaking about that. But then you hear it from different cultures, and even a small child who hasn't yet heard anything. I think I sent you that newspaper article. A 5-year-old boy said to his father, "That's why I chose you as my father." So these experiences are recorded, and they all point to the same idea that there's a choice involved in coming to this life. And some even say that there's a choice whether we can continue this life cycle, whether we return or whether we learn our lessons, not in earth life, but in other realms.
Now, my approach to the Shastra has been a little different. I mean, probably quite radically different.
Mm-hmm.
Although I have also undertaken um, a vast study of, all the different aspects of Vedic Shastra. But let's say beginning from mid to late 90s, I reached a point after almost 20 years of only studying, Vedic Shastra. I mean, the first 10 years, let's put it down to this, it was only Prabhupada's books. And the next 10 years, I studied much more Goswami books and Vedanta and the Purans and Upanishads and Yoga Sutras and so on. But everything was within this. And I reached a point where, after 20 years of study and practice, I still felt a sense of existential angst, of incompletion. And, certain events occurred whereby I thought I have not exposed myself to everything outside of the Vedic canon.
Yeah.
And I'm maybe even holding opinions about, things that I don't know about, that are outside of that, that don't really measure up. And this began which is still ongoing, which is now nearly 28, 30 years of investigating a vast range, of knowledge systems,
Yes.
religions, mystical paths, healing systems, linguistics, science, you name it.
Yeah.
So let's say this. So, and in the course of that, everything that I had already studied, and in particular the Gaudīya revelation, suddenly started to disclose itself in a new light, in a light that could accommodate all these various systems, within an ordered or holistic understanding. When I started the investigation, I tried to be as objective as possible, to not assume that the Gaudiyas have the real understanding and let's see how these measure up. I tried to enter into each particular path that I looked into, in their own right, to understand it from their own perspective, to see what would be disclosed, and then afterwards to make the integration between them. So when I hear what you just expressed, about karma, I don't feel in any way threatened by, let's say, what is being presented as an inconsistency.
Uh-huh.
But what needs to be questioned in this whole thing, or let's say even the questions that are being raised, have to be looked into both from the perspective of metaphysics, in other words, the science of being, and from the perspective of phenomenology, the science of meaning, or how the world, whether the world we're exploring is the world of science, the world that science explores, material nature, or and it's the laws of interaction that govern it, or whether we're experiencing exploring this field, the psychic realm. It is important to ground the investigation in a understanding of, okay, what is that realm that we are, what is the composition, what's the constitution, in a sense, of the psychic realm, and how is it experienced? In other words, how is that realm given in intuition within consciousness? Without looking into these things, we don't have the proper basis to even adequately evaluate the question. So I want to deal with this question of karma, but before I get into it, I think that it's necessary to, let's say, clarify, to enter these two fields. And in terms of, and this is not just from the Gaudīya perspective, I'm looking at this from the perspective, from the, let's say, the corresponding views of, what is referred to as the perennial philosophy. Basically, the core principles, the core theory of being, the common core principles of being of the great wisdom traditions, whether we're talking about Vedanta, whether we're talking about Buddhism, whether we're talking about Kabbalah, Christian mysticism. There are core, in spite of their differences, there are core ideas about, let's say, the hierarchy of being, from the absolute to, this realm and all the realms in between. So now, if we're talking about the psychic realm, then we are speaking about the subtle realm of Prakriti.
Yes, that's clear.
And even the instruments with which we are investigating this realm, in other words, the higher capacities of mind, even the instruments with which we are undertaking the investigation are themselves evolutes, subtle evolutes of Prakriti.
Right.
So obviously there is a correspondence between them. Like in Kabbalah, one of the famous sayings is, as above, so below, as below, so above. There's a correspondence between macrocosm and microcosm. So we should be clear, at least as Gaudīya Vaiṣṇavas, but as practitioners of any wisdom tradition, that are trying to understand this realm, the relation between the realm and absolute transcendence, it's important to make these distinctions so that we're clear about what it is we're investigating.
Yeah.
Okay, now, to get a better perspective of this, a correspondence can be made with Krama Mukti, gradual liberation. This is discussed in various places, but it comes up in Ṣaṭ-Sandarbhas in particular. And, so they discuss this immediate liberation, Sadhya Mukti, and gradual liberation, Krama Mukti. Now, the immediate liberation is when the Jivan Mukta, the one who is liberated while living. What does liberated by living actually mean? What does it entail? It means that one has seen through and transcended the identification with the gross and subtle body. And one is, firmly established in this seeing. Okay, now, for such a person, they use the word, there's verses from the Bhagavatam, second canto, chapter 2, 21 and 22, that discuss these two things. So the one who attains immediate liberation, the term used is anapeksha. They're free from apeksha. They're free from expectation, desire, from any sort of intent other than union with the absolute. So on leaving, they leave not only the gross body, they leave the subtle body, and they attain immediate transcendence. Whether that immediate transcendence is a merging in Brahman or Nirvana, Shunyata, or the lok of Bhagavan, doesn't matter in this discussion, because now we're talking about the criteria of immediate liberation or gradual. So in the case of the gradual, it's understood that there is some apeksha, there's still some desire to explore the subtle realms of the universe. And there's no better way to do this than when you're completely free from the limitation of this gross form.
Right.
But let's say the exploration of the subtle realm that is being done here and now by persons who have tapped into the higher powers of the mind, which is the process that you're involved with, and which many are involved in from different perspectives. What they're exploring is the same realm or realms, that are explored by the Jivan Mukta that's attained, gradual liberation. And it's attained by the same powers, the higher powers of mind. The only difference being that, for those of us that are undertaking this exploration, that are in these gross bodies, there may be more limitation, and there may be, let's say, moments of access of that state through specific psychotechnologies, of meditation and so on. Whereas the person that is, let's say, the Krama Mukta, there's no coming and going out of that state. They're, permanently grounded, or at least for the time they're there, But the correspondence I'm making is that the realm is essentially the same. Now we're speaking of metaphysics. We're talking about the structure of being or the constitution of being of the realm being explored, and phenomenology, how that realm is given in experience, in consciousness. Okay, now, if we're clear about this, the realm being explored, the means to explore it, and the fact that it entails a desire on our part to explore it, and that desire may be in line with the ultimate goal of transcending that realm altogether, because it's still a limited realm. Or it may be undertaken with a desire to master powers and all the knowledge that becomes available and everything that goes along with that, which is still entanglement in samsara.
It could be
Now,
deviation.
if we're clear on these things, then the question can be raised. And let's say the common, what needs to be pointed out here is, now you're speaking about the common experience of persons that are cultivating, that have access to some degree, these powers of mind, and hence, let's say, the givenness of karma, of the laws of karma that is given to them, is necessarily from the perspective of a person that is awake to that realm, to the powers of mind, and hence naturally, let's say, becomes eligible to enter into the intent of what form is going to be obtained. This is seen even in Krama Mukti. The desire, obviously the adept, the Jivan Mukta, at the time of death, it's not that, because they're a Jivan Mukta, that Paramatma is automatically, nonetheless recognizing they have some desire, so it's going to connect them. No, it's understood that because of the cultivation, because of the raised level of awareness, they have the possibility of choice. We're not talking about individuals who have no such awareness. Now, even in in natural life, in normal life, choice is the prerogative of those who are informed. If you are not well informed, the possibility of a conscious choice is greatly reduced. And all the people that are sharing this common understanding of karma are all people that have made themselves eligible to choose. Furthermore, this understanding of karma as balancing is certainly an important factor in the understanding of karma, but if we're talking about the balancing of the sum total of all phenomena within the cosmos, that can that can bring into a balance, the whole system of planets and stars and their movements, so on the macrocosmic scale, on the subatomic scale, of subatomic particles coming together, and on the psychic individual scale, what sort of intelligence would be required to keep all of this in balance?
Mm-hmm.
So karma essentially is the laws of cause effect condition. It's the whole hierarchy of nested causal relations that determine the possibilities for the cosmos as we know it, as it's given to us, including the gross realm, the subtle realm, and our movements through these realms. And much of it does, in fact, go on, like it goes on unconsciously. The processes that are going on in our body, of respiration and so on, are happening without our controlling them. But it's possible through accessing the higher powers of mind, the higher potentials within us, to become conscious of some of these powers, so to be able to access metanormal powers of healing, metanormal powers of integration of the body-mind system, and to bring these into alignment within these powers, as they are manifest within the subtle realm for healing, for transcendence, but this requires a profound understanding and a profound rooting in the core understanding, if your goal is to bring it into alignment
Mm-hmm.
with the knowledge that's already been given to you. But this would require, to a certain extent, even a radical reframing of that knowledge, to bring it into alignment.
So that is a very interesting point about this radical reframing. And I think that may be interesting also for a broader audience to understand how this could be reframed, because nowadays we hear so much about the earth moving into the fourth or the fifth dimension, spiritual awakening. There's a lot of knowledge available now, and people feel that spirituality becomes more of an mainstream and of more interest. So how would you view Gaudiya Vaishnavism in this regard? What kind of how could this be broadened so that this reframing can take place?
Well, first one has to be ready to enter into dialogue with all the various realms of knowledge, all the new insights that are coming forth. Now, here's the thing: not only in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but let's say in all the ancient wisdom traditions, although the view of the world that was presented was very vast,
Mm. Mm.
but still it did not have to take into consideration what has been disclosed through advancement in modern physics, chemistry, biology, in let's say the whole exploration of metanormal powers. I don't know if you've encountered this book. I'm going to show you here. This is called The Future of the Body.
Mm-hmm.
This book was published in 1992. This is by Michael Murphy, the co-founder of the Jīva Institute, which began a lot of these studies in the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to integrate especially Eastern wisdom traditions, but also all the great wisdom traditions of the world, you know, with modern science and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you look at some of the, okay, it's called Explorations
Mm-hmm.
into the Further Evolution of Human Nature.
Yeah.
Okay, and okay, so part one is Possibilities for Extraordinary Life. Part two is Evidence for Human Transformative Capacity. And part three, Transformative Practices.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge book. It's very, very well researched. He presents a lot of the research that was done up to that time. I'm sure now, 92, we're talking about the last 33 years.
Yeah.
Since that time, how much more research has been done? But this book can kind of be taken as, in a way, the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
on this topic, or it's at least one of the forerunners. Up to that time, from at least from the 1950s, so much research was done in even clinical study with LSD and other hallucinogenics.
Mm-hmm.
A whole body of evidence by transpersonal psychologists like Stanislav Grof.
Yes.
So many controlled scientific experiments to look into, telekinesis and all these different metanormal powers.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tremendous amount of evidence for these things, and his focus in particular is not just to present, to enlighten people about these potentials,
Mm-hmm.
but the integration of these potentials within the wisdom traditions, so that they are properly situated, to serve their specific role in supporting the growth of human beings toward ultimate transcendence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this has to be the orientation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so again, specifically about Gaudīya Vaishnavism, that, let's say, the opening towards entering into a dialogue with the possibility of these powers as being higher potentials of the self. Now, they may or may not be may or may not be interesting, not only to Gaudīya Vaishnavas, but to other, let's say, more the the traditional practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
Because after all, if we identify this realm as a realm of Prakriti,
Mm-hmm.
and that it involves an interest, a desire of some kind to explore that realm,
Mm-hmm.
then the question naturally comes, so is that not a distraction?
Right. Yes.
And is it not possibly leading us astray?
Yeah.
I've read a lot of Arida. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was, or at least, let's say, presents himself as an enlightened master, or is presented in that way. He's also recognized by many, or has been very influential on people like Stanislav Grof again, who was very involved with him at one time, Ken Wilber, and many others. I've read a lot of his writings and found it to be extremely helpful in terms of the whole exploration of the human development, chakra, the chakra system, transcendence, so on and so forth, and has gone through these realms, has explored these realms. So it's certainly not, let's say, critical of them, but it is intent on making clear what they're involved in. And here's one line that can seem derogatory, but can also seem humorous from another perspective. So he's saying here in one place, in his book, The Enlightenment of the Whole Body, which also gives you an idea of the breadth of the exploration. And he says in one place, all mystical experience is only a tour within the range of the separated personality. Now, this may also, for those that are, let's say, adepts in this particular realm, this may seem derogatory, but if we see it again in terms of krama mukti, then there's a certain sense in which this is true, because what is the subtle body?
Yeah.
It's still part of, it's still an upadi, it's still a superimposition on the Atma. It's still part of the separated personality. And obviously this statement would be like, if your interest is to explore this realm for its own sake, then what are you doing? You're taking a tour within the range of the separated personality. Okay, now, if your intent is to use the exploration of this realm as a support for the greater exploration leading to transcendence, then it's not that. But it's important to see that it can be that if it's being explored for its own purpose, just like the exploration of any other realm, for its own purpose, can, like physics explores the realm of material nature. Now, we're not going to say that the exploration of the realm of material nature is without value.
Right.
But if one is exploring it for its own sake alone, then the exclusive lending of attention to that realm, the sammukhya of that realm, does not, or it takes that attention away. So it becomes an exploration of the separate ego, or the separate, seeing Prakriti as separate.
Right. Now,
It's important to ground this investigation in a non-separate orientation.
There's very little knowledge given about this realm in Shastra, and I was always wondering whether the reason may be not to distract the adept, because it can be very distracting to have these experiences. So could that be a reason, or why is it that we know very little or hardly anything about what is happening between lives after death, we only know about this gross physical realm and then Goloka. But anything in between, there's not much information given.
Well, I would not necessarily agree with you on that. I mean, I think that there is a fair amount of information available, perhaps not in the detailed fashion, that you're becoming aware of in your present exploration. I think that it is elaborated more in terms of its metaphysics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like in the way that I have been outlining it up to this point, but for example, if we go into the fifth canto of the Bhagavat, although it's very difficult to understand, it's very nebulous in a way, and seems to be an account of the structure of the universe. But I think a lot of what it's dealing with is of a very symbolic nature, and that it's pointing to a certain correspondence, again, between the realms of being. In other words, if we take the chakra system of the body, the 7 chakras can find correspondence to the structure of the universe and its different realms. And let's say what can be disclosed within those realms. So in a sense, like one time, one of my Qigong teachers, who did a lot of out-of-body experiences, explored these realms extensively. One thing that was very interesting, he said to me once, was that this is not so much an out-of-body experience as an inner-body experience.
Yeah.
Because after all, it's experienced in the subtle body or through the means of the subtle body. So what is really being experienced here? Are we experiencing the dimensions, the subtle dimensions within this body-mind system or within the universe? And probably both realms are being experienced simultaneously, through the interconnection that is there. So there's actually a lot of information there in the Shastra, but it's of a very sort of mystical. The language is very mystical. It's hard to understand, so. But when you start to explore the realms that you're exploring, the realms of Shastra that pertain to it are going to take on new insight, and they should be looked into for new insight or for integration.
That's interesting.
This is something, just one last thing. Because my realm in particular, I mean, I have explored these realms to a certain extent through my exploration of Qigong. We can speak about this perhaps in another session. But because my interest has been to support my work of translation, to explore, metaphysics and phenomenology and so on, both from other traditions and from the perspective of modern science, consciousness studies, cognitive science, and so on, that every time I look into some new realm, my understanding of metaphysics in Gaudīya Vaishnavism is enlarged and enriched and disclosed in a new way. That makes me realize that, oh, this is actually there, but I never saw it. Why didn't I see it? Because it's not the primary focus. So like the realms that, the realm of physics, the realm of, psychic exploration, the realm of biology or chemistry or psychology, these are all, let's say, more specialized realms. They have specialized knowledge. So they're going to disclose things that are not the main concern of the wisdom traditions in general, but let's say that specialized knowledge, as it's disclosed in lived process, in immediate intuition, through accessing the psychic technologies that you're accessing, are going to be seen to be in correspondence. That's why I find it very surprising, because my investigation has led me only to see correspondence. The differences that are there are more differences of external features. So I really have to question the questioning that's going on, that perhaps the questioning that's going on is because they have not probed deep enough in their own metaphysics. They've not grounded their own metaphysics deeply enough, and hence certain data of experience of that realm, they're not seeing how it can be integrated.
Mostly when we hear about the fifth canto, what most devotees, the immediate association is, all these hellish experiences. And this seems to be more repelling, whereas consciousness explorers generally have very pleasant sensations when they go into these other realms. There's hardly any experience of hellish pain and suffering. So I'm wondering why it seems that the Bhagavatam puts more emphasis when explaining these realms on these negative experiences.
But again, I have to repeat the same point, that the investigation, the conclusion that's being drawn is of those who have a certain mastery, at least of the psychotechnologies, to be able to access these realms, whether it's meditation or something else. So naturally, the experiences that are given to them are not necessarily going to be the experiences of those who are, let's say, whose awareness is completely covered. Obviously, the descriptions of hell and so on are not applying to the awakened.
Right.
So it's important to bear in mind that we don't have a control group. Like, all the people who are adepts are all saying that, all reporting the same experience. You know, that after death there's a choice, that it's all light and bliss.
Yeah.
Of course, that's the experience that's going to be given to them. What about the experience of those who's who have been engaged in harmful actions of violence, so on and so forth, who are completely ignorant of themselves, as connected in some way to some greater reality. So this has to be seen in the inquiry. Now, as far as the experience of hell and so on, there are different perspective on this in different traditions that show both correspondence and difference, and that may also allow us for a different view, let's say, of the fifth canto itself. Now, first of all, just as Karma Mukti is and the exploration of the subtle realms of Prakriti takes place through the instrumentation of the subtle body. So also what is described as hellish realms, let's just make it an objective inquiry. We're not even concluding that such a thing exists, but let's say if such a thing exists, then just as the subtle realms of light and so on necessarily have to be explored in the subtle body, so also the hellish realms would have to be experienced through the subtle body. Now, in Buddhism, you have the idea of, after death, there's this, I'm forgetting now the term, but there's an exploration of psychic realms. This whole exploration of psychic realms, which occurs in something like a period of 49 days before the next incarnation, could be like, for the person undergoing the experience, could seem timeless.
Right.
Just as, you've reported, or the exploration of the subtle realm is timeless.
Right. That's another issue.
So it could literally be experienced as lifetimes almost, although from the perspective of gross realm experience, the time is very short.
Yeah.
And the psychological, there's psychological trauma experienced in the processing of the karma. If there's an accumulation of a lot of negative karma, the rebalancing can actually involve trauma. If you mean to say that those that are proposing the theory of karma is just a rebalancing, it almost sounds like, just a very pleasant, yeah, I'm going to choose, to be crippled and so on and so forth, just as a nice way of rebalancing. It's not that.
Yeah, no, it's painful.
There's trauma involved, but so it can be very traumatic. Whether it's exactly as is said in the Bhagavatam, or whether some of this it is hyperbolic, You know, like even Maharaji said, not everything in Shastra is literal.
Yeah.
There are some things that are literal, and there are some things that are perhaps symbolic in nature, or we know even in, I think it's in the Bhakti Sandarbha, you know, there's a statement that the Vedas teach in the way, or at least some of the teaching is in the way of as though reprimanding a child.
Mm.
You know, so the Shastra sometimes teaches by, you know, if you're bad,
Mm.
you know,
Mm.
Santa's not going to bring you any gifts,
That seems to happen quite a lot, yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
So, um, but what is important to understand is that we're talking about a realm of a psychic realm that, as much as the psychic realm that you're talking about is an exploration of the higher evolutionary powers and potentials, but still within the realm of Prakriti. So it has a corresponding psychological realm experienced through the subtle body that, you know, for those that have been living in ignorance, there's a certain rebalancing that is apparently of a negative nature, you know, but that creates some scar, you know, because all realms, all action, karma is essentially action.
Mhm.
And action, every action, including thought, creates a samskar, which creates a certain chain. Hence, karma is to be understood as a chain of or hierarchy of interdependent, nested causal relations. And this is not predetermination.
Mhm.
This is not predetermination. Certain things are predetermined. This body, I didn't choose it, not per se. The exact biology of it and physics and chemistry, you know, there's a certain amount of forming and constitution that's not happening by my will.
Mhm.
You know, that is the what they call the prarabdha karma. And every action certainly does, you know, set in motion a chain. This is also corroborated by um, the transpersonal psychology, especially Stanislav Grof
Mhm.
again.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that, you know, once a seed
Mm.
is planted, that it will necessarily lead to the effect.
Mm.
In other words, there's always the possibility, and the possibility will be greater the more conscious we are that we can take a different course of action. If karma is predetermination, then in the absolute sense, then we should be freed from moral obligation, from
Mhm.
moral responsibility. If we are absolutely predetermined, then the legal system becomes meaningless. How can you punish a person for a crime which they had no
Mhm.
control over if they were absolutely determined? So karma is not a theory of predetermination. It's a theory of understanding the intricacies of cause-effect relations and the possibility of intervention within that by conscious agents in their interactions, with these forces.
Now, as you speak of possibility, how do you view the idea of the quantum field having innumerable timelines? And in these timelines, there is just possibility. So according to our choice, we can change between these timelines and then experience a different reality. If we access that quantum field, which some people describe as the absolute or the source or whatever, how is that? Is there any reconciliation with Gaudiya philosophy?
It's a difficult question. I mean, it's a difficult topic because and it's one that's very popular now. I mean, it's all over Netflix and so many
Right.
shows are talking about this. Now it's always presented as the one and the same Jīva present in the multiple universes.
Mm-hmm.
At least this is the popular version of it. But in different universes, the same Jīva. It may not always be clear whether it's the same Jīva or a different Jīva, but it seems to be the same Jīva, but that has a different personality, a different, let's say mind-body system. So on this point, which may not necessarily be clear, I'd be interested to hear if those that you're doing studies with or have looked into, what is their exact claim in this regard in terms of the Jīva and its possible presence in different universes and different timelines. What exactly are they saying in this regard?
The idea is that there's one higher self or one core self, or there are different terms for it, like one so let's say soul, which has overview of all lifetimes of everything they have ever experienced. And there are different aspects of that personality. Each of them have their own life, their own personality, but they are connected with and part of that core self, or however you call it, super self or whatever, soul, original higher self. So these aspects can experience different lives either in the same timeline or in other timelines or in other time frames, but only from this perspective. These are different, let's say past and future, but from another perspective, from the perspective of that higher self, there's no time. So these can be all experienced simultaneously. And if one connects with that higher self, then one has a choice to experience consciously different possibilities or different timelines. Each of these aspects, each of these personalities can change into a different timeline. But all these personalities are like a soul group. They're all the same, connected with the same original self, and may not even be aware of their identities. We can remember different lives, previous lives, but we can also connect with deceased ones on the other side who may have already taken another birth, but they're still there as we have known them when they when they had that specific life. So that's possible. I can access my grandmother, for example, or anybody can, a medium can channel somebody in the form, in that realm, as that personality was known to somebody, whereas that personality may already have taken birth in another life, in another body. That means it exists, that same personality exists in that realm, in the subtle realm, and can present itself in the form as it was known to a certain person, and at the same time have another birth and be not even aware of that other personality. So that would be the multi-facets of that, of the self.
Yeah, I don't feel entirely qualified to elaborate too much on this question, because it's something that I need to reflect on more, or maybe need to look into more.
Mm.
But there is an interesting story that Brahma is coming for a interview, with Bhagavan, and the doorkeeper or whatever, the personal attendant,
Yeah,
goes to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan says to him, ask him which Bhagavan.
which Brahma?
And Brahma's like, which Brahma? Is there any other Brahma than
Yeah.
me?
Right. For her.
And it's like, then all the Brahmas from all the different universes simultaneously, bowing with their crowns at the feet of Bhagavan, and turns out that he's the least significant. He's only got 4 heads. Some have 10 heads, some have 100 heads, some have 1,000,000 heads, and there are a number of heads corresponding to the dimension of the universe. So of course we know from the Vedic perspective that Brahma is a post,
Yes.
that is held by a Jīva.
Right.
So there is a Brahma in every universe holding that particular post and endowed with the capacities to fulfill it. So this is perhaps at least showing some correspondence to this idea. But I think that as it's being elaborated, it's far more complex than that. But again, I don't want to elaborate too fully on this question. But if within the Akashic field, all experience is recorded, in a sense, all past, present, and future experience, so in some form, every lifetime that we have experienced is present. Let's say the information about that lifetime, or let's say even the immediate givenness of experience of that lifetime is accessible. But obviously all of these involve different lifelines. And the thing that unites all of them is that it's the same Atma undergoing all these different experiences. But the body mind of each of them is distinct.
Yeah.
There may be on some level, a causal relation between them in that one led to another,
Mm.
but nonetheless, each is distinct, but let's say those who are able to access past lives are able to see the link between them.
Mm.
So there's a link between them, but they're each unique in the sense that we're no longer that body-mind system. One may have been a king and another a pauper.
Right.
They're very, very distinct expressions of the body-mind system, but still in some way karmically linked.
Mm.
So now whether that much, is something I feel prepared to speak on. But now whether all of this is going on simultaneously or in different timelines is a question that I would need to look into, in more detail.
Mm-hmm. Maybe one last point. What I find interesting is that all these teachers and mediums and explorers come to the point of realizing the oneness of all. That's across all the cultures and groups. There's a feeling of that oneness, of that absolute and source, which I find not too difficult to access, because it seems that it is still within Prakriti at a very, very high level of maybe Mahatattva Prakriti. But none of these people has any notion that there could be something beyond that which we understand as, which is our goal, like Goloka Vrindavan, Vaikuntha, the realm beyond Prakriti. So it seems that, according to our tradition, it is not possible to have any knowledge about that without grace. For all those people, it would be very difficult to accept that only, we have the clue to get there, and they are still within the realm of Prakriti. So.
Well, let's even enlarge it, because amongst those that are accessing, these or cultivating these psychotechnologies and exploring these realms, but there are many who are also keenly interested in transcendence,
Hmm.
as a further goal, let's say, or grounding the exploration of the subtle realms within that greater cultivation or exploration, and that gain access to the immediate intuition of the self's unity with the all, if we call it Brahman realization.
Mm.
And of course, this will necessarily be experienced as unity consciousness. And actually, Jīva Gosvāmī discusses this in the Sandarbha, that Brahman realization is universal, or let's say it's universally available, just as because what is Brahman realization? Brahman realization is the realization of the Atma's conscious identity with the conscious whole.
Mm-hmm.
And because let's say, we are the Atma. We are Atma.
Mm-hmm.
So the realization of the Atma is in a certain way that which is most available to us, because that's what we are.
Right.
Although it's of the most subtle nature, but in a way it's more accessible to us than the knowledge of Prakriti.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can only know Prakriti immediately, through the instrument of the senses. The Atma we can know directly. And because the Atma and its constitution is an infinitesimal part of the whole, this is another question. I saw your eyes look up. So I know you're already thinking, are we a part? Because it's one of your questions. I can see your reactions, when you're struggling with certain points. This will come up in another discussion. But basically, we are, of the nature of the conscious whole, so the realization of that is immediately available. Now, what do we say about a Bhagavan? In terms of the realization of Bhagavan in regard or in comparison with the realization of Brahman.
Mm-hmm.
The realization of Brahman is as consciousness alone. Okay, now it may also be Satchitanand, but basically it is experienced as consciousness alone, whereas the realization of Bhagavan, and we're talking about Advaya Gyan. This is why the whole discussion throughout the Sandarbhas is of Advaya Gyan.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it can be disclosed as Brahman, or disclosed as Paramatma, or disclosed as Bhagavan. When disclosed as Brahman, it's disclosed as consciousness alone. Now, and how it's disclosed is according to how it's approached. So if all those undertaking this investigation are approaching it as consciousness alone, and it's disclosed as consciousness alone, and that the experience of that is immediate, then all those realizers will say, hey, what was your experience? Oh, my experience was, it was consciousness alone, all light and bliss. What was your experience? Mine was that too.
Exactly.
And then there's the consensus.
Yeah.
In the Christian mystics, what was your, you take a Teresa of Avila, or John of the Cross, or any of the others,
right,
who had immediate experience of the absolute as, as Jesus, or as, Christ consciousness, and they all confirm the same.
Yes.
So we all confirm the same. So that's what it must be. So then it must not be shunyata for sure. And those who have the experience of shunyata, well, Bhagavan, that's just, somebody's imagination. We make up a mythical god, so at least we can be pious. How do we integrate all these various different disclosures? So this is the question. And this is dealt with from the beginning of the Sandarbhas, that the disclosure is in correspondence with the orientation and even the psychotechnologies undertaken, and the mood in which they're undertaken, and the getting back to Jīva Gosvāmī's point. So while Brahman, in a sense, the universal consciousness of one's identity with that, it's more readily available. Of course, according to our understanding, it's still dependent on Swarup Shakti, because Swarup Shakti is the potency of the Absolute, by which alone the Absolute is disclosed in whatever form. But for the disclosure of Bhagavan, that's not so readily available. And it's not available unless the whole orientation has been such that it invites such a disclosure.
Yes.
So the consensus opinion is certainly validating the disclosure within the confines of the method undertaken. And this is true of all. Why are there differences in the wisdom traditions? Why is Advaya Gyan disclosed as Shunyata to the Buddhists? Why is it disclosed as Brahman, to the Gyanis? Why is it disclosed as Bhagavan to the Bhaktas? Why is the shamanic realm disclosed as it is to the shaman? Does one disclosure invalidate another? No. Yeah. So how do they fit together? This has to be seen. This has to be looked into. And in my own investigation, the Sandarbhas, if they're studied thoroughly and understood properly, is the basis of the integration that can be done. And this is why, the language in which the Sandarbhas have been translated is an attempt to facilitate such an integration. But it needs to be brought out in more detail, in dialogue and discussion with these kind of things that you're bringing up.